Hi, my name's Heidi. I'm an alcoholic. Let me say my thank yous. Thank you, Chris. We got to spend so much time together this weekend, and it was awesome. You know, I listened to this podcast on my way to the airport on Thursday, and this person said, you're in a place in your life that you have friends that you haven't even met yet. And I get here to this conference, and I think that's absolutely true, not just Chris, but other people that are here. I went to an awesome meeting yesterday that Barclay had, and it's called a 112 meeting, and you get to pick your line in the big book and then talk about it. And I picked, we let God demonstrate through us what he can do. And I said, because I'm afraid to speak tomorrow. There's all these really great speakers all weekend. Like, you guys have set the bar so high. Thank you so much to all the speakers. You guys are awesome. And but what happened, right? Oh, Barclays. But what happened out of that meeting is that was a 7:30 a.m. meeting. So all day yesterday, there was people that were in that meeting that came up to me and said, hey, we're praying for you. You're going to be great tomorrow. And I thought, man, that's Alcoholics Anonymous, right? Like, we just admit what's going on, and then people come up alongside of us. Steve, thank you for having me. Thank you to the committee. Thank you, Lee, for taping. Like, this is just such an honor and a privilege, and so thank you. And Georgia also. I have to thank Georgia. She's the one that gave Steve my name. I told her I was a little nervous, and she said, don't embarrass me. So I'm hoping not to embarrass her. My sponsor said, if you tank, imagine how good the other speakers will feel. So I feel the love. Like, I feel the love. When I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, I remember my first meeting, you guys said something to me like, what's your sober date? Because isn't that what we ask people when they come into the meetings? We want to know how sober they've been. And I remember I got this really perplexed look on my face, and I was like, I don't know. I have to go check my court documents. Like, I'll let you know the next meeting, because I really didn't know. I had no idea. I did not choose the day that I got sober. Like, I had no choice in the matter. I do have a home group. It's on Thursday nights. It's called the Welcome Home Group. So if you're ever in the small town of Grove City, Pennsylvania, we would love to have you. That also, my home group, when I moved, you'll hear, so when I moved back home to Pennsylvania, there was 2 people from that group that came to my house and said, you're coming with us. Our home group's yours now. And I was like, all right. And it's been a great choice. Every choice that I don't make seems to be a good choice in my life. Like, it just happens to work that way. I grew up in a really small town in Pennsylvania. And by small, I mean, like, my family lives on one road, kind of small town Pennsylvania. They just put a stoplight in 2 years ago. And I grew up surrounded by love. Like, just absolute love. Like, here's the kind of people my parents are. I would go to school and I would bring home like a B or a C, right? And my parents, and I would be like telling myself, oh man, you're so stupid. Why didn't you do better? And I'd show my parents my grade, and they'd say, did you do the best you could? And I'd say, yeah. And they'd be like, oh man, we're proud of you. But I couldn't hear it, like, it was like I was searching for this love and this acceptance, but there was something in me that was blocking me from hearing it from them. It was never that it wasn't there. It was always there, but I had this chatter. I don't know if you guys have, I have this chatter in my head that tells me you're not good enough. You're never going to make it. I mean, I'm in 2nd grade and I'm thinking this, right? Like, it's like you're not as good as those other kids. And so what it did is it made me the great, I'd like to say observer. Really, I'm a judge, but I was observing, right? Like, I like to observe what other people are doing. I like to observe how you talk. I like to observe how you sit, what you're doing. Whatever situation I'm in, I watch you so that then I can be whoever it is I think that you want me to be. Because it's not about, even if you tell me that you like me, if I think that you don't like me, then you can't tell me enough that you like me. I believe that, like Bob said last night, I'm the idiot that believes the voice in my head every single time. And so by the time I was 14 and I was at this place, and I'm a little delusional. I don't know if any of you can relate, but I like to call it a nightclub. It was an underage nightclub because it makes me sound really cool. It was really just an empty warehouse where they played loud music. Like, it was not a club at all. But outside, I walked outside and there was a group of people passing around a bottle of Boone's Farm wine. You guys really are my people. Because we all know that Boone's didn't come from a farm, right? Like, there's no way. And so I'm watching them drink, and I want to feel like they look. Like they look like they're happy, joyous, and free. They're having a great time. And so they pass that bottle to me, and I take a drink, and I'm like, oh my God, this is awful. In my head, I'm thinking, oh, I got to spit this out. But if I spit it out, what are they going to think of me? I can't spit it out. I got to swallow it. Okay, just swallow it. And that happens in like half a second, right, in my head. So I swallow it, and it burnt going down my throat, and then it hit that spot. And it was like I could breathe, and I didn't even know that I'd been holding my breath. And the way that night played out was kind of like every night played out when I drank. They passed the bottle around, and I continued to drink until there was no more to drink or no more to get. Went home with my best friend, and I threw up in the back of her dad's brand new vehicle. Every time I drank, I threw up. I thought there was just something, that's what happened, right? Like, that's what normal people do. I thought you drank until you throw up. Even any other nose pukers in the, right? Like, thank you, Scott. I knew you'd raise your hand, right? But that's what I did. I mean, I couldn't stop, right? My parents, though, there was not alcohol. Sometimes my dad would have some beer, or sometimes they would have wine, but this is how they drink. They would open a bottle of wine. Both of them would get like half a glass, and they'd put the cork back in the bottle. They'd drink a couple sips, and then they'd put the bottle back in the refrigerator. That's what I grew up with. I didn't know. I found out later on, though, that my grandfathers ran moonshine together. So I'm thinking it's in the family at some point, right? But there wasn't a lot of alcohol available. But when it was available, I always drank to oblivion. Like, I couldn't stop. I couldn't control it. I love the effect produced by alcohol. I love the way that it made me feel free. I love the way that it just made the chatter stop. It made it stop for just a little bit. And I didn't care that I knew that I would end the night puking somewhere on something. It didn't matter to me, right? Because the chatter stopped. When I graduated high school, I was petrified to go to college, because I knew that you lived in dorms when you go to college, and that meant I'd have to live close to another woman. And if I lived in a dorm and I lived close to them, I'm quite sure that they would hate me, because I hate me. There's no way that they could like me, so there's just no way I'm going to do that. Now, later on, I got to live in really close quarters against my will with a bunch of other women. So I went to a technical school, and I ended up, because I thought to myself, I could maybe get these voices to stop in my head if I could just make enough money. If I could get a good job, if I could make enough money, if I could just be somebody. If I could be somebody, I know I'll be okay. And so I graduate from this school, and I get a job at the local hospital, which was good. I bought a new truck, because I live in Pennsylvania. You need a truck in Pennsylvania, right? And I'm there, and it's wintertime, and it's awful, and I think, you know what, maybe it's not the stuff. That's not it. The stuff's not going to help me. And maybe it's Pennsylvania. It's absolutely. Pennsylvania is the reason that I feel this way. It's the reason that I'm awful. I just need to move south. And so I picked up and I moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, because I thought that would be the absolute cure to my thing. And I get a job in Charlotte at a hospital, and then I got another job that I got to fly around the country, and I got a bigger house, and I got a newer car, and I'm living on a lake. And if you had asked my parents at that point in my life how I was doing, they would have said, oh my gosh, she is doing fabulous. You know, she's got her life together. What they couldn't see, though, was on the outside, I have painted this really pretty picture. And it looks like I've got it all together, and I'm making a lot of money, and I'm doing a lot of things. But what they don't know is that as I fly to these different cities, I'm not out like touring the city to go to the Opry or to go somewhere. I'm going to the liquor store to get enough liquor that after I'm done doing the work that I have to do, that I can lock myself in the hotel room and drink myself to oblivion until I have to wake up the next day, get on a plane, and fly to the next city. You see, that job that I had was perfect for me because I would go in and I'd do a sales presentation for an hour, maybe two, and I can be who you want me to be for an hour or two, right? And then I got a retreat to the hotel room. I ended up moving from Charlotte. I moved back to Pennsylvania because I missed my mommy. And so I moved back, because I thought that was it, if I could just get back towards family. And then I decided at that point that it wasn't Pennsylvania, that I needed to live at the beach. And because the beach will cure your alcoholism, for sure, I thought. I didn't know I had alcoholism, but I knew that the beach would absolutely cure me. And so I convinced my boss that he should move me to Virginia Beach, and so he did. He was like, great. Because to him also, it looked as if I was doing great. This is how quickly it progressed. I was named the #1 sales rep in my territory in Virginia and Maryland, and a few months later, there was a couple other things that happened while I was in Virginia Beach. So I was in Virginia Beach, and I'm doing well, I'm going to different places. I'm still flying out of there. I remember at one point, though, my boss called me, and I was making enough money that I picked up some non-conference approved dry goods to go along with my drinking. So even though I was making a lot of money, it didn't look like that in my bank account at all, right? And I'd gotten to the point where, I didn't even really want to fly. I didn't really want to do my job at all, and I didn't want to go to this one place, and so I called my boss and I said, the flight was canceled. Can't get in. And he said, oh, okay, no problem. About 10 minutes later, I get a call from my boss. And he says, Heidi, that flight was not canceled. Now, I will tell you, in that 10 minutes, between me calling him and him calling me back, I had convinced myself that the flight was absolutely canceled, right? And I fought with him for the next, till he was done talking to me and hung up, that the flight was absolutely canceled. I can't differentiate truth from false. I tell myself a lie, and then I grab a hold of it, right? Alcohol was my master at that point. And so what happened with that job was I'd gone to a sales convention, I guess, with my boss and his boss, and we go to the convention, and we're all flying back, and we were drinking on the plane. We got upgraded to first class. Everybody drinks if you have free drinks, and so I'm drinking, and I'm not the most gracious person. I don't know if anybody saw me dancing on Friday, but that's a testament. I'm not. And I know that. Sometimes I can trip over my own 2 feet. Well, I was in this airplane seat, and I lost my balance, and I fell over, onto the aisle, which, no big deal, right? My boss picked me up, put me back in the seat. It was all right. And then it happened 2 more times. 3 times, you're not a lady, I guess. I don't know. So shortly after that, they asked me not to work for them any longer. And I'll tell you, for a couple years, well, not even a couple, for a lot of years, I would have told you they fired me because Medicare reimbursements really went down and they didn't need my position anymore. The truth is, they fired me because I'm a horrible employee that can't stay sober, right? And so there I am. I don't have a job. I can't apply for a job. Actually getting another job never really occurred to me because I knew I wasn't going to pass any pre-employment things that you'd need for the healthcare field. And so I got this really Really bright idea. That company that I work for, they gave us stock when you got hired there, and it was, their stock had skyrocketed. I got to keep it even after they fired me, and so I thought, I'll just cash in some stock, and then I'll figure it out. I can just cash in some stock, it'll put, I'll figure it out later. I just need to get a little bit to get by, and so I cash in that stock, and I continue to live in the high-class way that I'd been living, like go to the liquor store, go to the hood, come back, close all the windows, all the curtains, pass out, come to, repeat. It was like Groundhog Day, the worst day over and over. And I went through that money really quick, and I didn't have a solution. I didn't know what to do, and so I thought, okay, there's got to be another way. Like I know what, I'll do my taxes. Like I'll just do my taxes real quick. I'll get a quick refund, and then I'll be on my way. Like I'm gonna figure it out. I'm gonna get my life together. I just need a little money, and I'll get my life together. And so I go to fill out my taxes that year, and it turns out that when you cash in stock, that you're supposed to pay taxes. Whether I knew that or not, I don't know if that's a lie I told myself and I still believe it, I don't know. But what happened was I owed the IRS $100,000. I did not file my taxes that year. Now at this point in my life, my parents, I told you what great people they are, right? Like I can remember my mom would call me, and I didn't want to pick up the phone, right? Like I'm not answering the phone. And she would leave me messages, and she would say things like, Heidi, if you don't call me back, I'm going to have the state police come to your house to see if you're dead or alive. And I can remember thinking, who does she think she is? Like I'm 500 miles away. I'm not hurting her at all. What is her problem? Now I look back and I think I see the terror. Like we talk about the 4 horsemen, right, that we experience. That's what I brought to my parents. Terror, bewilderment, that fear, So today I call my mom every day. So she never has to wonder how I am or what her daughter's doing, And so those parents that I don't call back, that I think are horrible, I'm out of money. I owe the IRS a lot of money. I'm out of options. And so I called them and I said, can I come home? And they said, yeah, absolutely, you can come home, but there's 2 conditions. One is you got to get sober. The other one is you got to get a job. Like, you need a job, right? Joe was talking about get a job. That's what my dad said. And so I said, okay, great, I'll do it. And I remember loading up the U-Haul and driving home, and if you had asked me to put a lie detector test on, it would have said, absolutely, I'm going to get sober when I get home. Absolutely, because I really believed it. This is the last time. I'm done. I'm over it. And so I get home, and my head just won't stop. I have to have a drink. I have to have something to quiet it, And so I got 2 jobs, right? Like I got 2 jobs instead of getting sober, and I didn't have a vehicle to drive, and so my dad gave me his truck to drive. And one of those jobs, I lived about an hour from Pittsburgh, and one of those jobs was in Pittsburgh, so I would drive his truck back and forth every day. And now at this point in my life, I haven't taken really a sober breath in probably a couple decades, right? I always have something, I got to have something in me in order to wake up, in order to even get through the day, And so I'm driving home from work on October 15th, 2007, and I look and I see there's a tractor trailer pulled over and there's a motorcycle. And I thought, that's really weird. Why are they there? And then I felt a bump at the front of my dad's truck. And I thought, I wonder what that was. So I pull over and I get out of the truck and there's a man standing there, and he said, you just hit somebody. And I look and there's a man laying beside the road. And so I ran over and I started to do CPR because I'd worked in a trauma center. I knew CPR, and I started to do CPR, but I knew he was dead. Like I knew. And I'll tell you, I am so selfish and so self-centered at this point in my life that all I can think about is, I can't believe this is happening to my life. I can't believe this is happening to me. And the state police came, and I'm dressed up like a professional. I don't look right? Like the person who would have just done that. And he says, oh, we got to find out who did this. And I told the officer the only honest thing I told him that night was it was me. And so he took me and he put me in the front of his police car. You talk about grace, right? I'd never been in a police car before, although I should have many times before that. And they took me to the hospital and they did the little blood test. They took me to the state police department and they let me go that night. I was not charged that night. And I'd love to tell you that, that was it and I got sober. But the truth is, if I was already off the rails, I was really off the rails now. That voice in my head, I couldn't get it to stop. I continued to drink. I continued to drink and drive. I ended up getting 3 more DUIs. I got all kinds of other, I had a rap sheet that was about this long in an 8-month period of time. Like it went boom, boom, boom. I look back now and I think, man, God was like, stop, just stop. There's help. That happened in October. I remember in March of that next year, I was doing some stuff that my mom caught me doing that a mother should never see her daughter doing, and she said, you got to go to rehab, and I said, okay, I'll go. And so I walked into that rehab, and I walked into the detox, and they looked up at me, and they said, oh, you must be our new counselor. And I thought, you're right, I don't belong here, for sure. And so after 10 days, I discharged myself from that rehab. And a couple months later, I remember the date. Oh, and I only remember it was May 7th because my birthday is May 6th. That's the only reason I remember this. So I woke up on May 7th, and I'm in this, orange suit. And there's bars. And I'm like, man, what did I do last night? Because I'm not going to do that again. This is a horrible dream. I can't wake up. This is bad. What was that? And then I kind of came to a little bit more and realized I was not dreaming, that I'd landed myself in one county jail of a couple that I got to visit. But I remember thinking, oh my gosh, and so they all the charges that I had were all going through the system, so nothing had stuck at this point. And I remember going to the magistrate, and they said I needed $200 to get bailed out, and so I called my mom, I need $200. And she said, I'm not bailing you out. What are you talking about? I'm like, what do you mean? It's only $200. And she said, I know where you are tonight. I can sleep. Click. And she hung up the phone. I don't think she ever went to Al-Anon. She just kind of knew your principles, I guess. I don't know. She was... But I did end up, about a month later, I did get bailed out. And I remember I was there for 34 days. And I hadn't been sober for 34 days in a row in a really, really, really long time. And I remember thinking prior to that, the reason I continued to drink is because I'd gotten to the point where I'd be physically sick, right? And I had to drink. But they didn't give me any comfort meds there in that Venango County jail. I detoxed off everything, right? And at 34 days, I thought, man, I was as physically sober as I am right now, and I thought, I got this. I'm good. It's all going to change from here. And I leave that jail, and the first thought that came to my mind was 34 days is a long time. You got this. You should have a drink. You should celebrate. And then I'm back off to the races, and I remember my parents at that point, they said, we're not going to let you kill yourself. If you aren't willing to try to get sober, you can't stay with us any longer. I said, that's fine. And I got a tent, and I went and stayed in the woods. There was a guy that had a garage that, and not like Airbnb garages they have now. This was a garage where the oil is on the floor, and they put down the old, do they still make egg crate mattresses? Those old egg, they'd throw it over the oil that I'd sleep on. And then I met a woman that liked to drink like I like to drink, right? And so I moved into her house, and it was a nice house in a nice neighborhood, and there was plentiful to eat, to drink. other party favors. I mean, it was not a bad place, right? According to my standards. I'm talking about my standards, right? And on June 10, 2009, I remember I was walking through the woods, because as a kid I loved to walk through the woods. I felt like I felt God there. I felt like there was just something in it, and I felt connected. And so I'm walking through the woods, and it hit me that I couldn't drink enough anymore to get the chatter to stop. There was nothing that I could put in me that would stop that voice in my head, that would stop the voice from saying, you're not good enough, you're never gonna make it. And I was like, I know now, like the big book talks about how he could live with alcohol, or how he could live without it. And that's where I was, like in that place. And I remember just crying out, God, please take me. And then I waited for the lightning bolt to come, take me out, be done with my life. And God failed me again, right? Like there was no lightning bolt, there was nothing. And so I go back to the house, and a couple hours later, there was a really loud knock on the door, and it was my probation officer. Because I had all those charges going through, they had assigned me one, and she was there, and she took me directly to the county jail. And I'll tell you, I haven't had to pick up a drink or anything else since then. And I look back now, and I think that was God. God did take me, right? He took me somewhere completely different. And so the jail that they took me to, well, I went to like all 3 counties that I had charges in. It was like a county tour. But at the last county I was at, there was a chaplain in this county jail, and he was not an alcoholic, but he loved alcoholics. And so he had studied Alcoholics Anonymous, our early founders, and he had looked up the Oxford group. And so he knew that there was these steps that the Oxford group had done, and he offered, anybody that wants to do these steps with me, I'll do them. And I thought, well, I'll do it, Like I tried to commit suicide in my county jail cell, and I failed at that. Like I can't even do that right, and so I said, whatever you got, I'll do it. Like if I could just get out of here, like I'm gonna spend the rest of my life in a jail or a prison somewhere, but just get it out of my head. And so I started working these steps with him, and he was such a lovely man. And I guess they were watching me in that county jail, because after a couple months, they decided to let me out on house arrest, which was kind of unheard of for the charges that I had. And so I get out on house arrest, and one of the conditions of house arrest was I had to come to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I said, okay, I'll do it. And I remember that first meeting I said I would go to, and I had, it was an 11 a.m. morning meeting. And at 9:30, the voice in my head already was talking to me, like, I can't do it. What are those people going to think of me? I can't do it. And so I remember calling my house arrest officer, and I said, I couldn't get a ride to the meeting. And she said, you're a liar. And then she said some other words that were very explicit. And I thought, man, she doesn't really care about my feelings. Like doesn't she understand how hard this is? But she made it very clear to me that the next meeting I said I was going to go to, that I had to get to it, which was a Saturday morning meeting. And so I went to that Saturday morning meeting, and it's like up these like dark stairs. And I was walking up these stairs, and I could hear, it was talked about this weekend, that music of AA just coming from that room. I could hear it. And I walk in, and AA was what I thought it was, a bunch of old white men that were sitting around this table, right? And they had this blue book, and they handed me a blue book, and they sat down, and they introduced themselves, and I don't know what they read, because I just started crying. And I don't know if it was I was crying. I don't know why I know why I cried, because I felt at home, I think. Like I felt like they understood me. And I remember after that meeting, one of the guys that was there, he said, Heidi, we're so glad you're here. We hope that you come back. And I started crying again, because really no one had asked me to come back anywhere in a long time. Now, my parents took me back because they're good people. But if you had asked me at that point in my life, I would have told you I have no friends. Like I remember when I was in jail, they're like, have your friends write the judge. I'm like, friends? Everybody left me. I don't have any friends that stood by me. What I found out through the process of inventory was I had a lot of friends that I abandoned, that I stole from, that they would say, hey, Heidi, come over and, hang out with us. And I'd be like, oh, yeah, I'm going to be right there. And then I wouldn't show up, They didn't leave me. I left them. I separate myself from other people. And so it made me cry that he said, come back. And then he handed me the number of 2 women. He said, call these women, they'll help you. And I remember going home, and I thought, I can't do that. I was so afraid. And when I get afraid, this is a graphic description, but I sweat, right? Like armpit sweat down my legs, sweating to call these women, right? And I'm sweating, and I call that first woman, and she was so gracious, and she was so kind, and she said, that other woman's number that you have, she lives closer to you. Give her a call. And I thought, oh my God, doesn't she know how hard that was for me to do that? And I still see her in meetings today, and she has a whole different view of what that conversation looked like than I do, but I'm the one here today, so you get my version. So she gives me the number to this other woman who calls me. I call her, and she said, sure, I'll pick you up whenever you want to go. And so she starts taking me to meetings, and we would have a meeting on the way to the meeting. We'd go to the meeting and a meeting on the way back. And, I would hear you guys talk about things like sponsorship, and you'd talk about home groups. And, she taught me AA etiquette. Right? Like one of the things that she told me I had to do was every meeting I walked into, I had to shake everybody's hand, look them in the eye, which, oh my God, and introduce myself. And I thought, there's no way, I can't do that. And she said, yes, you can. And so I did, And I think, I was talking to somebody about that this weekend, because of that simple action that she had me do, I can go to places, and I can talk to people, and I can look them in the eye, and it's so amazing to me. And so I got up the courage, and I thought, okay, sponsor. I prayed about it, and I thought, this is the woman I need to ask to be my sponsor. And so I asked her to be my sponsor, and she said yes. And if you don't think God doesn't have a sense of humor, I had an ankle bracelet on, for my house arrest, and I come to find out she was a retired correctional officer. I didn't know that when I asked her, And so we had started to work through the steps, and I'd told her about all the stuff I was doing with that chaplain, and something else happened at this point. So all those charges that I had, those multiple charges, I had pleaded not guilty to everything, because quite frankly, it was not my fault. Nothing was my fault at all. And so they were all non-guilty charges. I hang out with you guys for a couple months, and I go back, and I'm pleading guilty to everything, right? Because I'm guilty for all of that and the ones they didn't catch me for, right? So I plead guilty, and I know that I have this sentencing coming up for this man that I killed. And I knew that I come to find out that he was a truck driver, he lived in Maryland, and that his family was coming to my sentencing. And I knew that our steps say that in the 9th step we make direct amends. That means face-to-face if you can, and I thought, I'm going to see these people, I need to make amends to them. And so my sponsor and I worked on a letter, and so I had this letter, and when it came time for me to get sentenced, I walk in the courtroom, and a few things happened that day. One, when I walked in, that courtroom was full of people from Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't have any friends when I came to you, and there it was, completely full. And so when it came time for if you've never been in court, when you get sentenced, they'll give you time that you can speak for yourself, plead your case or whatever. And when the judge asked me that, I said, I got nothing to say about me, but I have something I'd like to say to them. And I turned to that man's family, and I got to read the letter of amends that I had written for them. And I told them there was nothing that I could do to bring back their loved one. That sorry wasn't even a word that I could even use. It wasn't it. But I did promise them that anytime I could tell this story, that I would tell it, and that I hope that someone else would maybe not get behind the wheel of a car like I did. And I've done that. Anywhere I've been asked to speak, whether it's been in the basement of a church or even sometimes in the upstairs of a church, schools, anywhere. Keeping to our traditions, I've shared this story. Now in Pennsylvania, if you have a vehicular homicide DUI, it's a 3-year mandatory state penitentiary sentence, period. Like, you look up, here's the charge, here's what you get. Like, that's just it, that's what it is. And so when I went in there for the sentencing, I knew I was going to a state penitentiary for 3 years, and I was perfectly okay with that. As a matter of fact, I thought it should have been for much longer. But what happened in the courtroom that day is that the judge asked that man's family if he could separate the charges. So it would be a charge of DUI and a charge of vehicular homicide. And that man's family said yes. And what that happened is that the judge could sentence me to whatever he wanted to sentence me. And he ended up sentencing me to 10 to 24 months in the county jail. And I look at that, and that man's family was okay with it. And I look at that and I think about God's grace. I didn't deserve that. I didn't deserve that at all. And so I get my sentence, and I even ended up getting on work release while I was there. And it was great. You know, I was on work release, so people from AA would come pick me up and they'd take me to work, and somebody else from AA would pick me up and take me home to work. You know, it was really awesome. They have, where I live, we have these little Serenity cards, and they send it around the table that people sign them, and they send them off to people that are sick or in jail or whatever. And I'll tell you, I had a Serenity card sent to me every single day I was in that jail. I got mail every day for 8 months. Somebody from Alcoholics Anonymous wrote me. You guys are just amazing. So when I got out of jail, I couldn't wait to get back to you. Like, I just couldn't wait. And so I get back to you, and I'm still working at that job that I got from work release, and I met a guy. Because that's usually where you meet your soulmate, right, is on work release. And I remember telling my sponsor, I'm like, I met this guy, and she said, let's slow down. How about, you should really write a fear inventory on why you're so afraid of just being alone for a little while, you know, figuring stuff out. I said, oh my gosh, Cindy, that is a great idea. I will get right on that. And then I got pregnant and moved him in. I did write that inventory years later. And what I found out was it wasn't a fear of being alone. It was a fear of what I thought you thought of me if I was alone, because my identity was absolutely wrapped up in whoever it was. You know, if I had a boyfriend, if I had a husband, if I had whoever I was with, my identity was wrapped up in them. And it was all back to that fear of what I think you think of me, you know, that I'm not good enough if I don't have somebody beside me. So anyway, so we have this little girl, and we did get married, and life got really big, and it was really great, and I went back to school, and I have a job, and I got pregnant again, and I go to the doctor for this pregnancy, and the doctors start telling me all this stuff about this child, that something could happen, or this might happen to you, and I'll tell you, you know, I might have been driven by fear that I found out through that inventory, right, like prior to when I was drinking, like I was just driven by that fear, but now I have this gut fear that something's going to happen to this child, and I'm so afraid. And so I would go to meetings, and if they ask if anybody has a topic, I'd always raise my hand, you know, like, because it's all about me, and I would say, you know, I'm really afraid, and you guys taught me that there's a fear prayer in our big book. You know, we ask God to remove our fear, and that who we could be, who He would have us to be. And that would help me, and you would say things like, you're not having a baby today. What are you doing today? And it would help me, you know, refocus. Or, you know, my sponsor at the time, she was really good with, what are you grateful for? Ugh. I mean, I like that now, but then I was like, don't you understand? And you guys would hold me up, and you let me bring up that topic. Oh my, I don't even know how many times I brought up that topic, and you would just keep reminding me and reminding me and reminding me. And on February 16th, 2013, I gave birth to a beautiful, beautiful baby boy. And I was holding him in my arms 8 hours later when he died. And I'll tell you, in those 8 hours, I got to be his mom. I got to be with him. Thank you, Alcoholics Anonymous. I have these beautiful memories of my child, like all that little boy ever knew was love. And I know where he is. Later on, I had done a meditation, and I saw that little boy in meditation. I saw him running through a field of flowers with butterflies, and I can hear his laughter when I tell you this story. So I know where he is, and I'll see him someday, I can tell you that now, 11 years later. However, at that time, I can remember laying in the intensive care. I died 3 times that night on the table. They transfused. I had none of my own blood left in me. Like they did so many transfusions, and I remember laying in the intensive care unit, and it was the women from Alcoholics Anonymous that were holding my hand in the ICU as my husband went to the funeral home. Because I said, he's got to have socks. You got to get that baby socks. There was just those little things, and when he got home to our house. You alcoholic men, that's where you were. You were at our house. You guys you carried us through that. I remember leaving the hospital, and I had a thought that maybe I should get some grief counseling. And I'm not a counseling kind of, I didn't grow up with counseling. I didn't have any of that. But so I knew it had to have been intuitive, right? So I called on the way home from the hospital. I called this grief counselor, and I started grief counseling. And I'll tell you what, it was fantastic for grief. But what happened after that is my husband, he didn't have the same foundation of Alcoholics Anonymous that I did. He didn't have a sponsor, he didn't have a home group. He would go to meetings sometimes, but he liked to work, and he just worked a lot. And the pain of losing his son, the pain of just the pain. He was at work one day, and somebody offered him something. Well, actually, they offered him cocaine. So they offered him some coke, and he took it, and he was back off to the races, And I remember when he told me that, he was like, I was tired. I had to have something. And I be like, I drink coffee when I'm tired at work. I don't like that. But our marriage did not survive. It did not survive. I couldn't do it. I remember, I had a little bouts of Al-Anon here and there, and I had some Al-Anon friends. And I remember calling my one friend, and I said, it's getting really hard to sleep with my ATM card in my bra at night. And she said, Heidi, normal people don't do that. And I thought, oh, okay, we got to do something different. And so I filed for divorce, and I'm back. I'm back in AA. Although I live in a small town, and I had pretty much convinced everybody how they should feel sorry for me. I just lost this baby, and now my marriage is awful, and I can spin a story so that you'll absolutely feel sorry for me, right? And so I'm going to these meetings, and I'm still feeling bad for myself. And I remember it was a Sunday night. It was about a year after my son died, and I had the topic. It was a discussion meeting. I had the topic. It was me. That was the topic we were going to talk about. And this woman walked in, and she was a mess, her hair was a mess. She was sobbing. Before she ever got to the table, she kind of smelled a little bit of wine, and something clicked in me. And I remember looking at her, and we were like, how can we help you? What can we do? And my entire, it shifted, constant thought of others. And so it was huge. And I remember I was at another meeting, and I don't know what I said. I'm sure it was something crazy, because afterwards, it was my home group. One of the home group members pulled me aside and said, hey, there's some really great prayers on page 86 of the Big Book. You should try them. I remember thinking, who do you think you are? I went to seminary. I know how to pray. Now I didn't say any of that, right? That didn't come out of my mouth. That was my our inside voices. Instead, I said, okay, thank you. And I went home, and I thought, where is that Big Book, right? Because I had skimmed it in the beginning when my sponsor and I were going through the steps, I'd skimmed it. And I thought that's really all you did. I didn't know it was a textbook. And so I stashed it away somewhere. And so I found it. And I found those prayers, and I just started praying that prayer. We ask God, to direct our thoughts, that it be divorced from self-pity. I don't even know if I got past that. It was like that hit me. And so I started doing that upon awakening, 11-step prayer, and then at night I would look upon that reflection. And that's all I did for the next week. Nothing else, nothing out of the ordinary. And something changed. It was like there was, whatever it was, that connection I had to that power when I first got sober, when everything else was, good in my life. I felt like good in my life. It was like something changed. It was like I had tasted honey and I needed more. I loved that effect that was being produced by God. And I remember going back to the meeting the next week, and I said, who told you about this stuff? Where did you find it? I want more, And thank God for the tapers, right? Because what had happened is the person who had it, he had gotten a workshop that Bob and Scott had done. And it was a workshop through the steps. It was a 10-hour workshop. And so we would go to a meeting, and we would come back to my house, and we would put this workshop on, and I'd have a notebook and my big book, and I just started going through it. Started at the very beginning. And if it said to write something, I wrote it. If it said to pray, I prayed. If it said to observe, I just started doing it. Whatever it said, I did it. And things started to happen in my life that were absolutely extraordinary, that had nothing to do with me, I remember I was working at this doctor's office at the time, and I was all excited, on fire for Alcoholics Anonymous. And so I have the little big books. I got meeting guides. They're all in my little drawer. And the doctor knew my story, because to work in healthcare, when you have a felony, you kind of have to give them a reason why. And so he saw the transformation that Alcoholics Anonymous had in my life. And so if he had somebody come in had trouble with alcohol, he would bring them, as he was checking them out, to my office, and he would go, hey, Heidi, you need to talk to this one. I'd be like, all right. And so I'd have, the men had the men's numbers, the women's numbers. And I remember I would give books, and I would give meeting guides, and I thought, I usually never saw those people again until they were back in the doctor's office. But I was at a meeting about a year ago, and there was a guy there, and I don't even know what the topic of the meeting was. It wasn't about me. And he said, I remember I was at my doctor's office, and this little girl gave me my first big book, and I've been here ever since. I don't even remember, God just uses us. And so I told you I filed for divorce. There was something else going on at this point in time. I had health issues, pain, Georgia. I had some pain in my neck. In case you guys didn't know, Georgia has pain. And I couldn't move my neck from the left or to the right. I just couldn't move it at all. And so I'd gone to these doctors, and they told me that I had something called thoracic outlet syndrome. It sounds serious, right? And what had happened is I have an extracervical vertebrae that is impinging on the arteries and the nerves, and that's why this hand goes numb, and I would have pain in my arm, and they said the only way to fix that is to have surgery, have it cut out. And I'm like, cool, I like surgery, I like the medications that you have to get into surgery. I'm good to do that. And so I go to my home group, and I'm telling my home group, I'm going to have this surgery, and I'm not going to have pain anymore. It's going to be great. And that home group member that I told you about, that we'd been studying the big book, he looked at me, and he said, hey, Heidi, do you have any unmade amends? And I was like, I have the IRS, but you really don't want me to call the IRS. I owe them $100,000. Wesley Snipes just went to federal prison for $70,000. There's no way I can call the IRS. And he looked at me and he said, how free do you really want to be? And he walked away. And I thought, I'll show you. I'll go to federal prison. My daughter will grow up without a mother because of you. I'll do it. And it's not that I didn't want to make amends to the IRS. It was on the back of my mind all the time. I was so afraid, And when you owe the IRS that kind of money, you don't have a bank account, Funny story about that husband I filed for divorce. I remember one of the things that got really mad at him about is that he had used our money, that was supposed to go to rent. He had used it for other things. And then I took a better look at that The reason that he had the money is because I had not made amends to the IRS. I couldn't have a bank account, so I had my checks direct deposited into his account. It's his fault that he used that money, for sure. It's funny how clear you can get when you put pen to paper. And so I called the IRS, and I said, I need to set up a payment plan with you. And the lady said, okay, great. What's your social? She's all excited. And how much do you want to pay? I said, I can do $20 a month. That's what she did too. She laughed at me. But by the end of our conversation, she was like, I can't believe you pay that much in rent and have to mow your grass. I said, I know. Now at this point, I'm working at the doctor's office, but I'm also cleaning houses on the side. Financially, really $20 was a lot for me. I couldn't. And so she said, I got to send this to my supervisor. I can't make this. And I thought, okay. So I go to bed that night and I wake up and I'm waiting for the feds, right? They're going to be in my driveway, I am sure. And, because I'm looking over my shoulder. And 2 weeks later I get home and I go to the mailbox, and there was 2 things in the mailbox. One was my divorce papers from my kid's dad, and the second was a letter from the IRS. And we were talking about spiritual awakening, and different actions, and how that's what it is for me too. It's a different action. And so I'll tell you, when the IRS, it's not that they never communicated with me. They communicated with me on a regular basis. I, however, would take their communication and put it either in a drawer or directly to the garbage, depending on how I was feeling. But something happened on my porch that day, and I actually took their letter and I opened it and I read it. And it said, we will take your $20 a month payment. We'll even send you an envelope every month so that we get our money. And I said, okay, this is fabulous, right? So I remember going to a meeting and again talking about the grace of God. I don't deserve this. How did I get this? This is so amazing. And I go home that night and I'm putting pajamas on and I could move my neck. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I called that home group member, right? I'm like, you're not going to believe it. I can move my neck. And he said, of course you can. It's a promise in the big book. When the spiritual malady is overcome, so is the physical and the mental. There's a big difference between making all but one of your amends and making all of your amends, Heidi. And I remember hanging up the phone that night and I thought, he is so smart. I should marry him. Now, it took me a couple years to convince him, but we are happily married today. And we love Alcoholics Anonymous. When it talks about we abandon ourselves, right? It's not like he works his program and I work my program. We work the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And we both know that AA comes first, that it's God, it's AA, and then it's us. And that's the way that we've done this. And it's just been absolutely amazing. One of his dreams was to go to the Pacific Group. He thought that was he wanted to meet Clancy. And so at one point he's like, hey, you want to go to LA? And I was like, is there a beach? Can I go to the beach? That was really my only reason to want to go. But so we go to the Pacific Group, and somebody had mentioned something about the Midnight Mission. And so I was like, yeah, sure, we can go take a tour, whatever. I mean, no big deal. And so we go to the Midnight Mission, and it's in the heart of Skid Row of Los Angeles. And I can remember that first walking through that street and seeing the people in the tents, and I saw myself, because that was me. I was just in the woods, but that was me, And if you've never been there, it's there's these steps in the courtyard, and step 1, step 2, step 3, and you walk in the doors, and it's like the power of God hits you when you walk through the doors. And I remember we had a tour, and I talked to people, and I heard people's stories that used to be living out there, and now they're working here, helping people. And we got in the car to leave, and I just started weeping, like that uncontrollable crying. And I said, I got to come back. I got to be a part of this. And I had never once thought of moving back away from Pennsylvania. Like, I'm a single mom now. I need my mom. I need my mommy. I need help, right? But I just felt like God put that on my heart, that be some part of the Midnight Mission. And so I just started praying about it. I didn't get a U-Haul and move immediately. I just started praying about it. And it took a couple years, and I would fly out every couple months, and I would volunteer at the Midnight Mission, and I would come home. And in 2019, I decided to just start to apply for jobs in California. I thought maybe if I could just get out there, I could volunteer and be a part of it. No big deal. And so I ended up getting this job at an orthodontist office in Manhattan Beach, California. Now, I don't know anything about teeth. I know nothing about orthodontics. But in 2019, we sold everything that we owned, and we took a Ford Fusion, and we moved to California with the hopes that maybe I could be a part of the Midnight Mission. And so I can remember working at this orthodontist office, and people would come in. It was like the richest of the rich. And they would come in, and their teeth would be really white and really straight. And I'd be like, oh, wow, they must be here for aftercare. And they would be there to get their teeth whiter and straighter. Like, it was crazy to me. And I had this coworker. Her name was Ashley. And I hated her. And here's why I hated her. She lied all the time. She lied to the patients. She lied to the doctor. She sat there and lied. And what I realized through calling, I would call my sponsor, and I would be so mad. And I'd do a 10-step. Every lunch break, I'd be doing a 10-step on her. Until, after a couple of days, she's write an inventory. She was tired of listening to me. And what I come to find out was I wasn't really mad that Ashley was lying. I was mad that she was lying because then other people might think that I'm a liar. What would they think of me, right? And then I went a little further, and I saw that I am a liar. I've lied. How many times in my life have I lied? And I never lied because I was a pathological liar. I lied because I was afraid. I thought, man, maybe Ashley's afraid. Wow, I know what that's like. Okay, God, how can I help her? And it completely changed my outlook. I also believe that God gives you lessons, and once you get the lesson, he moves you on. And I'm telling you, that exact day that I had made the choice, how can I help her, what can I do, I got an email from Georgia, and she said, hey, I have an opening. Would you like to apply for it? And so I did apply for it, and I ended up getting this job, and it was going to be fantastic. I was going to be a community events coordinator. I was going to get to plan these events and hang out with people, and it was just going to be great. And so I started that job on March 4th, 2020. I never planned a community event. But what happened was I love to write, and I write a lot, and I write little blogs, and Georgia knew that, and she said, hey, you can't do events, but maybe you could help me write some stuff. And so I just started writing, whatever she asked me to do, I would do it. And sometimes I would work at the office a couple days a week, and I'd work from home a couple days a week. And in this period of time, my daughter was 9 at the time, and she moved out there with us, but she hadn't had a chance to make friends. And then when COVID shut everything down, it was really hard on her. My mom, I think she broke her back at that. I don't know. My mom has a lot of health problems, but she was really, really sick. And so after being there for 6 months, we prayed, and our lease was up, and we were like, where are we going to go? And we both felt like God said, go home. And I was really mad, really, really mad. And, now I'm writing inventory on why I'm mad at God. And what I found out was my sponsor at the time, she said to me, you work 12 steps down to humility, and that first tradition isn't about just AA groups, it's about your family, what's best for your family. Your life is not about you. What's best for your daughter is that you go home. What's best for your mom is that you need to go home and be a daughter for her. Stop it. And so I go in to quit my job, and Georgia said, you've already learned how to work from home. Maybe we can work this out. And so I got to move back to Pennsylvania, and I get to stay with the Midnight Mission. And if you can't tell, I love the Midnight Mission. So we move home, and And I thought things would be the same. Like I'd just move home and just get right back into AA like I was before, but it wasn't. It was different. I don't know if it was different or if I was different, but I felt disconnected. I remember saying to somebody, I don't feel like I'm a part of AA anymore. And they said, well, maybe that's because you're not. Like, get in the middle. Where are you doing? One of the things that we had done before we left is I was going to a detox. And so I was like, all right, fine, that place closed. And so I called a rehab and I started going to the rehab. And we take a big book meeting every Tuesday into the rehab. I started praying, like, God, I need people to help. Who can I help? Who can I help? And I get a call out of the blue from this woman that I was in jail with all those years ago. Now, in between this time, Amy had tried to get sober, and we would get to like the 4th step, and she'd be like, I'm out, I'm done, but this time she called me. What had happened is her daughter had died, and then her brother died. And she said she had a moment of clarity. If I keep doing what I'm doing, I'm going to die too. And so she called me. She said, I need to get to a meeting, and I need to get to a meeting now. And I said, okay, go here. I said, are you ready to get serious about this? She said, I am. And so we started this journey of walking through the steps together. And I'll tell you, she's sober today, and she is raising her granddaughter, and she just bought her first house. Like, how awesome is that, right? Another thing that happened, I was working part-time for the Midnight Mission and part-time at this other job, and I had 2 bosses that were absolutely amazing and believed in me. And my boss in Pennsylvania, he was so angry with, like, the fact that I couldn't drive. Or, there was where I worked, like he had to defend my right to work there because I had a felony. He's like, how long are they going to hold your past against you? Because you've obviously changed your life. It's wrong. And I'm like, well, I'd gotten to the place where I was just like, they're my consequences. It's cool. But on October 15th, 2020, which was, 13 years to the date of that accident, I got a call from the Pennsylvania state representative. I wasn't supposed to get my driver's license back till 2024, and he called to tell me that we've looked at your record, and you haven't gotten in trouble in 13 years. Nothing. No jaywalking, no tickets, no nothing. We're going to grant you an early license. And so they let me have my license back 4 years early, and which is amazing. It's just absolutely amazing to me. I remember thinking one of the things I was afraid of is that my daughter, she's grown up in AA. She's the AA baby in our town. Like, she practices these principles more, and she's pretty open. Like, she knows about our lives. Her dad that I told you about, I think he's in a halfway house right now. Like, he's doing okay. He's sober today, but so she knows us, right? So I get this car, and I have an interlock in the car, and if you don't know what that is, it's where you have to blow in it before it'll start, and it blows throughout the day to make sure you're not drunk if you're driving. And so I pick up my daughter's friend, because really their moms don't care. Like, I thought everybody would be, looking at everything. They don't care. And we're driving, and in the back seat are the girls, and the thing goes off, and it beeps, and I'm blowing in it. And my daughter's friend says, hey, Miss Heidi, what is that? And I can't tell her because I'm blowing, right? But my daughter, sitting beside her, says, oh, Jenna, that's a thing my mom has to blow in so that they make sure that she's not drunk. Before I was born, she used to drink a lot. She actually killed somebody once. And that's why she didn't have her license all that time. But she's cool. She's cool now. She goes to meetings. And Jenna went, cool, And I just like to tell that story because that's really what our lives are like. Like, that is absolutely what we do, Like she knows that I'm here because I get to, be with you guys. And, you guys taught me. You taught me how to be a mom, and you taught me how to be authentic. You taught me how to be a friend, And all my life, I just wanted you to love me and to accept me, And I come here and I do these steps and I hang out with you guys, and what I've learned is that it's in giving to you that I feel the most loved, Like, it was all about me giving to you. And I am just so grateful that you guys let me give to you this weekend because I have felt so much love. Thank you so much. You did great.